Medicare isn't the end all be all to your health and retirement. In fact, there is just one last period that people often neglect, they don't plan for. The reality is, over 70% of people over 65 will need some form of long term care in their lifetime, and yet, so few of us are prepared for it. Welcome back, everyone, to Health and Retirement and Golden Advice for Your Golden Years. I'm your host, Trey Basa, a licensed health insurance advisor with Market Medicare Advisors, and today I'm joined by my friend and mentor, Kimberly Sixkiller, our Chief Insurance Officer and Life and Long-Term Care Agent at Market Advisory Group. Kim, welcome back. Welcome in. We're actually going to be transitioning you into a host role for future episodes. Super excited to have you do those.
Thanks for having me. Yeah,
Of course.
exciting.
I'm happy to have you. I'm excited because I've been wanting to make these episodes. I primarily talk about 65 plus Medicare, but that is not the entire picture for folks moving into retirement. Medicare is just their regular hospital medical insurance, their everyday kind of stuff. But like I teased, there's that one last part towards the end of life. Unfortunately, people often neglect. So, bringing you in here today, why don't you give a little bit of background for our viewers, our folks listening at home?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like you said, Medicare is really kind of that culmination of getting to move into retirement, in my opinion. But we so often neglect the fact that long term care is really about the need for assistance at all ages, right? So, I really love to have the opportunity to talk to people as they've really gotten into kind of the meat of their lives, right? As you're getting ready to turn 40 in your 40s, your 50s, and those early 60s, because life happens, right? And so at any point, there is a need for assistance. Maybe we're in some kind of an accident, something happens on the job, or some kind of illness. And so we want to make sure that we're prepared before things happen.
To kick things off on today's episode is our first segment, In the Know. Market Medicare Advisors is dedicated to keeping you in the know with all things health and retirement. Our segment today is going to be focusing on long-term care. So, Kim, if you can, just a really brief overview of what is this long-term care policy we're going to be talking about.
Yeah, so long term care really isn't about the need for assistance in a facility, but it's more about needing help with our active lives. So when we're living day to day, things that are activities that we don't think about, right? So long term care itself is defined as needing assistance with bathing, with dressing, toileting, incontinence, transferring back and forth, and dressing. So those are actually activities that we do daily. Think of the things that we need to do from a very early age on. And so it's not about care in the facility, but help with our daily life.
Right. And if somebody were to say, start making these plans today, they might be in their prime at 65, ready to enjoy retirement. They don't have to have this policy here and now. They don't need to use it, I should say. But we were talking in the studio, getting this policy earlier on just ends up being a little bit more manageable for folks, right?
Yeah, it's not just manageable, but it's also far more, it's cheaper to get it sooner, right?
Absolutely.
When we're looking at our insurance from age 40, for example, you're looking at a healthier situation. So it's more manageable on your budget to look at these policies in your 40s. The underwriting process that can be involved with the insurance companies, you're healthier, you have more longevity. And so the cost is just more effective at that point.
I think I have the unfortunate circumstance of getting a phone call at least once a month where somebody calls in and says, hey, we got to move so and so over to XYZ facility, or we got a big surgery coming up later this year and it's going to be probably the last one. And unfortunately, they're asking for a policy and I have to give them a super high price point because this is a time where they would need the policy and they have to pay for it now versus when somebody picks it up at 40, they're paying into it over a longer period of time before they actually have to use it.
Yeah, I tell people a lot of times that if you are discussing long term care plans in your later 60s and 70s, are you really planning or are you firefighting at this point, right? Because at this point, the different health concerns have already begun, right? We've already gotten into a situation where we know that we have these needs. And so obviously the cost is going to be more because the insurance companies say, oh, we're not looking at an in case, it's a when it happens.
That's the big thing. It's a thing that people don't like to think about. They don't like to plan for, and because they're not planning for it, it comes around to bite them in the behind later on.
Absolutely. And the reality is, I tell people not to be disrespectful, but the acts of daily living that we, talked about, they're the same acts that we're taught when we're born, right? So toddlers, those are the things that we need assistance with when we're young, when we're first growing and we're being taught. But they're the same exact things that begin to be a little more difficult for us as we age or when there's an accident, right? So those basic acts are the things that we want to help people make sure that they have assistance with, not just in a facility, but more often than not in your home. Can I get someone to come into the home and help me so I can stay where I'm comfortable and where my family has visited me for so many years?
We talked about what the policy is, kind of what it looks like. We talked about who should be looking for these policies. I think the final thing that we need to talk with our listeners is, how do we find the right plan for people? How do we make sure that they're getting on something that in 20, 30 years that they're going to use?
Yeah. So everybody's health is completely unique to themselves. And so what we like to do is we want people to come and visit us here at Market Advisory Group so that we can look and say, all right, what is your current age? What is your optimal health situation? Do you want to stay in the home or do you want to move to an independent facility where you don't have to mow the lawn, you don't have to worry about shoveling snow? And then we look at those plans and go, okay, which ones fit your needs? And then which ones fit your budget? And so there are dozens and dozens of plans, tons of different carriers, and that's where we really wade through and make sure that you're purchasing the ones that have the right build inside of them for you.
You're gonna have to give me a little bit insight here, but have you ever met with a client and you did a review for them, and the policy sitting before you was super boilerplate, very basic, like, hey, I'm grateful that you came in with a policy, that you have something, but I don't think this fits with what you're wanting to get done in due time when it's actually time to use this policy. Yeah, is there like a boilerplate policy that's kind of going around that you have to talk people around?
Sure. So traditional long-term care that people think about are typically plans that someone will purchase and say, if something happens or when something happens, I can get assistance inside of an assisted skilled facility and for a certain amount of time, right? So the average is between 2 and 5 years, and those policies are saying when something happens, we'll give you this much per month. Those are very basic policies, and I like to explain them to people as like buying car insurance, right? I'm paying monthly so that I hope I never have to use it, and if I don't ever use it, I don't get that money back, right? So that money's just kind of gone. Those are very boilerplate policies, as you referred to them. But now there are so many more options, hybrid options, that we can build our own policy if we want around what we want it to look like. So first and foremost, most people tell me they want to be able to stay in a home setting. So I want to make sure that we have that non-confinement option. You're not confined to a skilled facility. And then if I never use it, right, and that's not because maybe I never had a need for it, but maybe something happened where there was an accident, someone passes away, or they are spry and they are able to just take care of themselves all the way until they kind of pass away, then what happens with those premiums, right? And so there's so many policies now that with a minimal cost, a large portion of the premium can go on to their beneficiaries or their estate or wherever they want that money to go. So someone benefits from it besides just the carrier or Uncle Sam.
If you want to stay in the know with all things healthcare insurance, long-term care policies, Medicare in general, or perhaps have a professional review your policies, please give us a call at 833-624-REPORT. That's 833-624-7376. Or you can email us at mail@marketmedicareadvisors.com and connect with us today. Our next segment for the show is going to be the client case study, where we break down and explore client cases we're actively working on. We work with a number of clients from the 65 to 70-year-old age range, and our clients right now are having to take care and start thinking about their long-term care policies, or even they're taking care of their parents right now. So I want to just take a minute and talk about what we're doing with our clients today and how we're helping them through with all of these different, well, how you help people with all of these different long-term care policies, all of the different riders, and how you get the right plan for someone.
Absolutely. So, one of the clients that I'm working with right now in the Kansas City metro area, his name is Alfred, and I'm working with him and his daughter, Janet. And it has really kind of turned into two separate situations, right? The first was they came to us because Alfred simply cannot live at home anymore. It's not that he can't necessarily take care of himself day to day, but the overwhelming taking care of the home, mowing the lawn, those are things that are just at the point where he can't do that anymore. So Janet is looking for a way to get him into some kind of an independent or assisted living facility. And so what we're doing is with Jonathan, one of our advisors in Kansas City, we kind of went through what his finances look like and then said, okay, what is available to help ensure that his money can work a little harder, because he doesn't really qualify yet for long-term care. He's in his late 60s, turning 70 next month actually. But we were looking at his finances and said, he's got a pretty robust IRA account. How can we move some of this money so that now when he needs assistance, right? Because he's kind of on that line that the doctors have said, you know, there could be a point where we're a little worried about you being a fall risk, right? He can bathe himself, but getting in and out of that tub is getting a little more sticky for him. We want to put him in a situation where he's got a policy that when he needs it, there is additional funds available for that long-term care assistance, and he's not just eating away at the income that he's got saved. So we're helping him with that now. And honestly, what it made Janet do is go, you know, I have kids who are grown and in college, and I would like to not be a burden on them. Can we look at my finances? So it really has morphed into two things. Let's take care of him first, and then let's look at her situation.
I want to take a step back and talk about the greater firm that we work at here. When we're talking about affording and paying for these long-term care policies at such a later age, unfortunately, it's going to cost a good amount more than if somebody picked it up, say, in their 40s, mid 40s. So you mentioned one of our financial advisors, Jonathan, bringing him into the conversation, making these plans for future assets to be used on that long-term care policy. That honestly, from my perspective, that is just common sense when it comes to retirement planning in general. Having those funds set aside for long-term care policies, for that care, end-of-life care. So that person, the client, doesn't become a burden for their children.
Yeah, what's unique, I think, for Market Advisory Group is that we do see that health is part of that puzzle, right? And so that is why Market Advisory Group has all of the different firms, right? As I'm talking to Janet, she's in her 60s. She's not on Medicare yet, but that's a conversation that she needs to start having. And so I will connect her with Marcus in Kansas City, and so she can have some conversations about Medicare, right? But then even more importantly, what we realized in our discussions with Jonathan in the room is while Alfred has some great IRAs and he has some great assets, he doesn't have a medical power of attorney in place. And so some basic things that honestly a lot of people don't have, we then said, all right, this is another opportunity where we need to get Doug in the room, who's our attorney there in Kansas City, and we need to make sure that you have the basic documents in place to make life easier on your entire family and, frankly, to remove the roadblocks so that when you need medical assistance or you need to use these policies, we are not scrambling to figure out legal documents.
There is not just a one size fits all solution. There's a lot of overlap in some other sectors in retirement. If you have questions that maybe we should help you answer or focus on here on the show, a case that we could explore, please write us an email at mail@marketmedicareadvisors.com and be sure to give us your name and city so we can give you a shout out on the show. And as always, you can give us a call and schedule a meeting so we can get to know you and your situation a lot more intimately. Because as Kim and I are talking right here, right now, there are so many little pieces that go into just getting Alfred set up for his long term care policy. That brings us to our final segment of the show, our mailbag segment, where we take a question from viewers just like you and answer them right here on the show. Today's question comes from Judy in Overland Park, Kansas, asking, how much should I spend on a long term care policy? And how do I guarantee that I'm getting a good value for my policy?
Well, that's a great question, Judy, and it's one that we hear so often. As far as how much you should spend, um, you're not going to love my answer, but that's really dependent on your personal situation and what you want out of that policy. So there's no magic number or percentage, but rather what I would say is we want to sit down and have a conversation and look at what do you want out of your policy. Again, this comes down to, do you want a policy that just pays you a certain amount when you're confined to a skilled facility, or are you wanting more of a policy that will cover you at home? So the cost is going to range into what we do with it.
I think we run into that kind of question all the time, and in a lot of different sectors of our firm, especially Medicare. How much should I spend on this policy, and am I going to get a good value out of it? And unfortunately, it always comes down to it depends. How do you want to get this policy, and what is acceptable to you for XYZ care?
Yeah, the promise that I can make to you, Judy, is that at Market Advisory Group, we only work with carriers and we only work with policies that we feel are in your best interest and that do provide the value needed. So there are times where a client has heard about a policy that frankly may cost them more and may make more sense from a commission standpoint, but it's not what makes sense for you, Judy. It's more than you need. It's an over-insuring situation. And so the one thing I can guarantee you is if it doesn't make sense, we're going to let you know that. We don't want you to over-insure yourself, and we don't want you to spend more than you need to, because all that does is affect the other parts of your financial life and your personal life.
I'm going to circle back to what our first segment, just talking about boilerplate policies in general. I think that they are okay for, getting your foot in the door, but we sit down with folks and we figure out what do they need for their plans. Not to mention, we bring in other parts of the firm to really hone in on these decisions. Medical powers of attorney. How do we set aside the assets for paying for these policies, or even the tax consequences of tapping into IRAs to pay for all of these medical policies.
Yeah, the long-term care boilerplate policies, if you will, still have their place. They're just more, they're fewer and far between. They're less prevalent as the need because so many people want to make sure that there is maybe some kind of a life benefit. The health is important to them, but they want to make sure there's a life insurance piece to it. And then there are people who that's not important to them. All they care about is making sure that their burial is covered. So every policy has its own unique place. And in most families, those policies are not the same, just like you kind of see in Medicare, right? The one size fit all doesn't even work for the husband and wife.
That'll be it for today. Be sure to subscribe to stay tuned for more videos just like these for all of your Medicare, your healthcare needs. Don't forget to like and share so you can help your friends and family by getting them the information they need to know about their Medicare, their long-term care. You can catch this show and our entire catalog of shows on our channel, youtube.com/@retirementhelp, where we archive all of our previously recorded and aired shows with professionals from healthcare to financial to estate and tax sectors as well. All of us coming together in one place to talk about how we're actively working with clients today to prepare them for to live their best lives in retirement. I've been your host, Trey Basa.
And I'm Kimberly Sixkiller.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Health and Retirement, the talk show of golden advice for your golden years. We'll see you next time.
Unless otherwise indicated, all client and prospect names mentioned on this show have been changed to protect the identities of the individuals discussed. The content provided is intended for informational and educational purposes only. The views, statements, and opinions expressed herein are those of the individual speakers. This is not endorsed or affiliated with any U.S. government agency, the Social Security Administration, or associated with any federal Medicare program. We do not offer every plan available in your area. Any information we provide is limited to those plans we do offer in your area. Please contact Medicare.gov or 1-800-MEDICARE to get information on all of your options. Investment advisory services are offered through Foundations Investment Advisors LLC, an SEC registered investment advisor. All rights reserved.